he woke up to silence. Not the kind that follows peace, but the kind that feels heavy, like it's pressing against your chest. Captain Daniel Reeves opened his eyes to a gray sky filtered through tangled jungle branches. His head throbbed. His throat was dry. For a moment, he couldn't remember where he was, or who he was. Only the smell of smoke, gunpowder, and damp earth surrounded him. Then it all came rushing back: the ambush, the explosion, the screams. The radio call that never went through. The last thing he remembered was shouting for his men to fall back, then the flash that tore the world apart. He sat up slowly, his body aching, his uniform torn and burned. The jungle around him was eerily quiet, like the world had forgotten him. No voices. No aircraft. No sign of his unit. He checked his weapon. Half a magazine. His canteen, empty. His watch, cracked. "Alpha Squad, this is Captain Reeves. Do you copy?" He whispered into his radio, but only static answered. He stood and looked around. He was somewhere deep in enemy territory, behind the old river line. He had been here before. But that was days ago, maybe weeks. He started walking, his boots sinking into mud with every step. He needed to find higher ground, find a signal, find something. But the deeper he went, the more he realized something strange. There were no signs of battle. No burned-out vehicles, no bodies, no bullet casings. It was like the jungle had erased everything. Hours passed. The sun rose and fell, and Daniel found himself circling the same moss-covered stones again and again. He found a stream, drank greedily, then noticed something caught in the roots of a tree. A rusted dog tag. He wiped the mud off and froze when he saw the name, Lieutenant Michael Warren. Michael had died in the ambush. Daniel had seen it happen. He'd buried him himself. He dropped the tag, his mind spinning. Could this be another ambush site? Or had he somehow wandered into another unit's graveyard? As the night came, he built a small fire, the crackle breaking the haunting quiet. He looked at the dog tag glinting faintly beside him. The jungle whispered like it was alive. He felt something watching him. A flicker of movement. A shadow between the trees. He raised his rifle, heart pounding. "Who's there?" No answer. Just the rustle of leaves. He stayed awake the entire night, gripping his rifle, watching the darkness breathe around him. The silence felt wrong, like time itself had stopped moving. When the morning came, Daniel found footprints, barefoot, small, and fresh. Human, but not military. He followed them for hours, deeper into the jungle until the path opened into an old clearing. There, half hidden under vines, stood the remains of a wooden hut. He pushed open the door, expecting nothing. Inside, the air smelled of rot and smoke. But on the wall, carved into the wood, were words that made his blood run cold. "The war is over." Below that, scratched in smaller letters, "Go home, Daniel." He stumbled back, heart racing. No one knew he was alive. No one could have known his name here. Not anymore. He stepped out into the clearing again, the jungle humming around him, and for the first time, he noticed how wrong everything looked. The trees were older. The ground was thick with vines that shouldn't have grown this fast. He realized something that chilled him to his core. Maybe the war had ended. But how long had it been since he'd fallen? The world suddenly felt foreign, distant, like time had slipped away while he slept. Daniel gripped the dog tag in his hand, his heart pounding with fear and disbelief. Somewhere, deep inside, he knew he wasn't just lost in the jungle. He was lost in time. And whatever happened 40 years ago wasn't done with him yet. Daniel walked for hours, trying to make sense of what he'd seen carved into that wall. The war is over. It didn't make sense. He'd just been in the middle of it. Gunfire, orders, chaos, it had all been real. And yet, now there was only quiet. He followed what looked like an old supply trail, overgrown with vines and roots. The jungle had reclaimed everything, like nature had waited patiently for men to destroy themselves, then quietly moved back in. Every step felt heavier. His boots, once solid, were wearing thin. His rations gone. His radio dead. But what unsettled him most was how nothing felt familiar anymore. The trees were taller. The riverbeds had shifted. It was as if the jungle had aged without him. He reached an old encampment by dusk. The remnants of tents, rusted metal frames, and faded American flags still clung to splintered poles. He could tell this had been one of their forward bases. He crouched, brushed away the dirt from a wooden crate, and found a name burned into it: Echo Company. His company. He opened the crate. Inside were empty rations and a weathered photograph, his unit, smiling in front of a helicopter. He remembered that day. The sun had been brutal, the laughter short-lived. But what struck him was the state of the photo. It was ancient. Faded, brittle, edges crumbling at his touch. He stumbled back, staring at it like it was proof of something impossible. He heard a twig snap. "Who's there?" he called out, voice steady but cold. A figure emerged slowly from the shadows, barefoot, wearing rags, face hidden under grime and beard. His hands were empty, trembling slightly. "American?" Daniel asked cautiously. The man didn't answer right away. He stepped closer, squinting, as if seeing a ghost. Then, in a raspy voice, he whispered, You're not real." Daniel raised his weapon slightly. "Identify yourself." The man laughed, a hollow, broken sound. "They told me you were dead. They all said you died in 74? Daniel froze. "What did you just say?" 74. The man repeated, his eyes wide with disbelief. "It's 2014, Captain. You're 40 years late." Daniel felt the world tilt beneath him. He lowered his weapon slowly. The words didn't fit. 2014? That couldn't be possible. He took a step closer. "Who are you?" The man looked at him for a long time before saying quietly, "Private Cole Jensen. Echo Company. You pulled me out of the river during the ambush. I thought you were gone." Daniel's mind went blank. Cole had been 19. Barely old enough to shave. The man standing before him was grizzled, scarred, and at least 60. Cole's eyes filled with tears as he reached out, hesitating before touching Daniel's arm. How are you still young?" Daniel didn't have an answer. He looked down at his hands, rough, scarred, but still the same as they'd been during the war. His reflection in a pool of rainwater showed the same 30-year-old face he remembered. "I don't understand," Daniel muttered. Cole nodded slowly. "You wouldn't. None of us did when they found the others." "The others?" "There were reports," Cole said, voice low. "Over the years, they found a few soldiers wandering these jungles. Some thought it was trauma. Some thought time forgot them. They called it the Ghost Squad. Men who never came home because the war wouldn't let them go." Daniel stared at him, his heart pounding. "What happened to them?" Cole's eyes shifted. "Some couldn't live with what they found. The world moved on, Daniel. The country moved on. Nobody's waiting anymore." Daniel's throat tightened. He thought of his wife, Emily. The last letter she sent him had been folded in his chest pocket the day of the ambush. He reached for it now, pulling out the crumpled paper. The ink had faded, but her words were still there. "Come home soon. I'll be waiting." He clenched it in his fist. "Where is she?" Cole hesitated. "You really don't know?" Daniel shook his head. Cole looked away, voice breaking. "She passed away. 20 years ago." The silence that followed was heavier than any explosion. Daniel felt his knees weaken. The air itself seemed to vanish. He stood there, staring at the jungle canopy, the weight of 4 decades crushing him in a single heartbeat. Cole spoke again, gently. "There's a village not far from here. They might have something for you. They found pieces of the past. You should see it." Daniel didn't answer. He just started walking. The jungle felt different now, not an enemy, but a graveyard of time. Every tree whispered memories, every step echoed with ghosts. As the sun began to fade, Daniel turned to Cole and asked, "Why did you stay here all these years?" Cole smiled faintly. Because some of us couldn't leave. Not until everyone was accounted for. He paused, his gaze fixed ahead. And now maybe you're the last one. Daniel said nothing. He just kept walking, his heart a storm of disbelief and sorrow. But somewhere, deep inside, another thought was beginning to form, a question more haunting than all the rest. If he had somehow survived 40 years untouched by time, what else had been waiting for him out here? The next morning, Daniel followed Cole through the jungle in silence. The path was narrow, carved between thick roots and damp soil. The air was heavy with mist, and every step stirred the smell of decay and rain. Daniel's mind raced with fragments of memory, none of which made sense anymore. He kept glancing at Cole, trying to piece together how this man, once a 19-year-old private, was now an old survivor guiding him through the ruins of time. The sound of birds filled the silence, but to Daniel, it all felt wrong. The war zone he remembered was never this quiet. After several hours, they reached the edge of a small clearing. In the distance, wooden huts rose from the ground, surrounded by palm trees and rusted metal scraps. Smoke curled lazily from cooking fires. Children played near a muddy stream, their laughter faint but alive. "This is it," Cole said softly. "The village." Daniel stepped forward cautiously. The villagers turned to look at him, eyes wide, whispers rippling through the crowd. They saw his uniform, still intact, his boots, his pack. He must have looked like something out of a history book. An elderly man approached, his posture bent but his gaze sharp. He spoke in Vietnamese, his words low and uncertain. Cole translated. "He says they've seen soldiers before. But not one like you. They say your face matches a picture from an old newspaper." Daniel frowned. "A newspaper?" Cole nodded. "They've kept things here. Artifacts. They treat them like memories of the war." The old man motioned for them to follow. Inside one of the huts, the air smelled of incense and wood smoke. On the walls hung yellowed photographs, images of soldiers, civilians, wrecked villages. And there, framed in glass, was something that made Daniel's heart stop. A photo of him. Same face. Same uniform. The caption underneath, though faded, was still readable: Captain Daniel Hayes, declared missing in action, 1974. He stared at it in disbelief. The villagers watched quietly as he reached out, fingertips brushing the frame. The paper crumbled slightly under his touch, like everything fragile from a world that had forgotten him. Cole handed him a folded newspaper from a nearby shelf. It was dated August 1974. The headline read, "Tragic loss in the Highlands, entire unit missing." Daniel sank onto a stool, the paper trembling in his hands. "So it's true," he murmured. "I never made it home." Cole sat beside him. "You did now." Daniel gave a hollow laugh. "Too late for that." The old man stepped forward again and placed something small in Daniel's hand, a locket, rusty but recognizable. Daniel opened it slowly. Inside was a photo of his wife and daughter. His eyes filled with tears. "Where did you get this?" The old man spoke softly. Cole translated again. "He says it was found near the river years ago. The jungle keeps everything, he says. Even the things that break your heart." Daniel closed the locket and held it to his chest. "She would have wanted me to come home," he whispered. Cole looked away, giving him a moment. Later, as the sun dipped below the horizon, they sat outside the hut. The village was quiet except for the hum of insects and the crackle of firewood. Daniel stared into the flames. "What happened after the war, Cole?" Cole sighed. "People moved on. Some soldiers came back heroes, some came back broken. Others didn't come back at all. The world got faster, smaller. We became history lessons." Daniel's voice was barely a whisper. "And those who didn't come home? They got forgotten," Cole said. "Until people like you show up." Daniel smiled bitterly. "I should have died out there with them." "Maybe I did." Cole shook his head. "You didn't. You lived, Daniel. Somehow you lived." Daniel looked up at the stars. They seemed sharper, brighter than he remembered. 40 years, he said softly. 40 years, and the world forgot me. Cole turned to him. Then maybe it's time you remind them. The words hung between them, heavy with meaning. Daniel wasn't sure what that meant, or how a man who'd vanished in another lifetime could return. But something deep inside him began to shift. A spark. A pull toward closure. That night, Daniel couldn't sleep. He walked through the quiet village, past huts and fires, until he reached a small altar covered with old helmets and tags. Names etched into rusted metal, each one belonging to a soldier lost to time. He reached out and froze. There, among the names, was one he knew too well, his own. Captain Daniel Hayes. His breath caught. He touched the tag, the metal cold against his skin. For a long time, he didn't move. Finally, he whispered, "Maybe I did die here." Behind him, Cole's voice broke the silence. "Maybe not. Maybe you're what's left of the part that couldn't rest." Daniel turned, eyes glistening. "Then what am I supposed to do now?" Cole looked at him steadily. "Find out why you're still here." Daniel nodded slowly. For the first time since waking in that jungle, he felt something close to purpose. Tomorrow, he decided, he would go back, to the site where everything ended. Maybe the answers were still waiting there, buried beneath the vines and silence. At sunrise, the jungle was drenched in golden light, soft and humid. Daniel stood at the edge of the village, pack slung over his shoulder, staring down the overgrown trail that led deeper into the wilderness. Cole joined him, carrying a walking stick and a quiet expression. "You sure about this?" Cole asked. Daniel nodded. "If I don't go back, I'll never know what really happened. I have to see it." Cole gave a small nod. "Then we go together. I've spent my life trying to forget that place. Maybe it's time I face it too." The path twisted through dense trees and tall grass, every sound amplified, the rustle of leaves, the distant call of birds, the soft crunch of boots on damp soil. With every step, Daniel felt the years folding in on themselves. It was as if the jungle were breathing around him, pulling him back into a memory that had never ended. After hours of walking, they reached a ridge overlooking a wide valley. The air was still. Below them lay the remnants of what used to be their base, collapsed bunkers, rusted barrels, half-buried sandbags, all swallowed by vines and roots. The ghosts of war lingered there, silent and unblinking. Daniel's chest tightened. This is where it happened. He stepped down the slope, boots sliding on the wet ground. The closer he got, the stronger the memories became. Gunfire echoing in his head, the screams, the blinding light of explosions, the smell of smoke and blood. His hands trembled as he reached the clearing where his unit had once fought its final stand. Cole followed quietly. "You remember now, don't you?" Daniel nodded slowly. "We were surrounded. I tried to call for air support. The line went dead. My men—" He stopped, voice cracking. "They didn't make it." He knelt beside a mound of soil, half covered with ferns. Something metallic glinted beneath the dirt. He brushed it away and uncovered a faded nameplate. Private Lewis Harper. Daniel froze. Harper had been the youngest in the squad, barely 18. Daniel remembered promising his mother he'd bring him home. Cole placed a hand on his shoulder. "We buried them here after the fight. Couldn't carry them out." Daniel's throat tightened. "And me?" Cole hesitated. "We thought you were gone too. You were hit bad. When we came back days later, your body wasn't there. We assumed the blast buried you." Daniel stared at the ground, silent for a long time. "So I didn't die. I just disappeared." Cole nodded. Sometimes the jungle takes what it wants. Daniel rose to his feet, eyes sweeping the clearing. In his mind, he saw flashes of that night, the flicker of flares, the shouting, the chaos. But one moment stood out. He remembered crawling through the mud, wounded and disoriented, hearing voices, enemy soldiers closing in. Then nothing. Only darkness. He turned to Cole. "How did you survive?" Cole looked away. "I shouldn't have. But after the fighting, some villagers found me. I stayed here. I couldn't face the world after what we'd done. So I stayed in the jungle and tried to make peace with ghosts. Daniel took a deep breath. You've been here ever since? Yeah, Cole said softly. Waiting for someone like you to come back. They spent hours searching the site, uncovering fragments of the past, a dented helmet, a rusted canteen, scraps of torn fabric. Each piece was a story. Each one a name. As the sun dipped low, Daniel found a broken radio, its metal corroded but still recognizable. He picked it up, turning it in his hands. This was mine, he whispered. I tried to call command that night. The signal cut out, and I thought we were abandoned. Cole watched him. You weren't abandoned, Daniel. You were lost. And the world just kept moving. Daniel looked toward the horizon. Then I have to go home. I have to see if there's anything left of my life. Cole sighed, his voice quiet. Home's not the same anymore. People change. Time forgets. Daniel met his eyes. I need to remember for both of us. They camped at the site that night, sitting by a small fire as rain pattered through the trees. The air was thick with smoke and memory. Daniel stared into the flames, lost in thought. I used to dream about this place, he said softly. I thought it was just guilt. Maybe it was the war calling me back. Cole nodded slowly. Maybe it's because your story isn't finished yet. Daniel leaned back, looking up at the stars through the canopy. Then tomorrow I'll finish it. I'll find a way out of this jungle, for good. Cole didn't respond. He just nodded and stared into the fire. The night was quiet except for the rain and the faint hum of the forest. For the first time in 40 years, Daniel Hayes wasn't haunted by the war. He was finally walking through it, one last time. And somewhere in the darkness, the ghosts seemed to watch in silence, as if they too were waiting to see what he'd do next. At dawn, the jungle awoke with the cries of unseen birds and the low hum of insects. Daniel stood near the ashes of the dying fire, his mind fixed on a single thought: he couldn't stay here. Not this time. He looked back toward the ridge, where the mist hung like a ghost over the valley that had once been his battlefield. It felt like a farewell. Cole approached, still quiet from the night before. If you're going, he said, you'll need help finding the way out. The jungle doesn't let go easily. Daniel gave a faint smile. You've been lost in it longer than anyone, Cole. But you found me. Cole nodded. Maybe that's what I was waiting for. They packed what little they had and started walking north. The trail was faint, swallowed by years of growth. Every few yards, Daniel stopped to catch his breath, not from exhaustion, but from the weight of memory. Every tree, every rock felt familiar and foreign all at once, like walking through a dream that refused to fade. As they moved deeper into the hills, Daniel began to speak again, voice low and steady. When I was out here, all I thought about was home. My mother's porch. The sound of rain on the tin roof. I used to think if I could just make it there, everything would be okay. Cole kept his eyes forward. And now? Daniel hesitated. Now I'm not sure what home even means. Maybe it's just a place where someone remembers your name. Hours passed before they reached a narrow river cutting through the forest. The current was fast, the water brown and heavy from rain. Daniel crouched, touching the surface with his fingers. Still the same smell. He murmured. I used to fill my canteen here before patrols. Cole scanned the trees. We'll follow it downstream. It leads toward the coast. Maybe someone there can help you get back. They walked for miles beside the river, the sound of rushing water filling the silence between them. Occasionally, Daniel caught glimpses of old rusted helmets half buried in the mud, fragments of rifles tangled in vines, relics of the past refusing to vanish. Each one told the same silent story: not everyone made it home. By midday, the sun burned high and hot. They rested beneath a tree, sharing what little food Cole had packed, dried fruit and a handful of rice. Daniel looked at him, thoughtful. Cole, why didn't you ever leave? You could have gone back years ago. Cole gave a tired laugh. Back to what? The world forgot us, Daniel. The war ended, but nobody came looking. I figured maybe it was better to let time win. Daniel stared at him for a long moment. Maybe. But you don't have to stay forgotten. As they continued, the jungle began to thin. The air changed, drier, sharper. Through the trees, Daniel spotted smoke in the distance. Not from fire, but from cooking stoves, from life. The faint sound of laughter drifted through the wind. Civilization. He stopped walking, eyes fixed ahead. It's real, he whispered. Cole looked uneasy. Be careful. The world you're walking into isn't the one you left behind. Daniel didn't answer. His pulse quickened as he walked faster, pushing through the last stretch of brush until the trees opened up to reveal a small settlement. Wooden huts lined a dirt path, motorbikes parked along the side, the sound of radios playing unfamiliar music. A few villagers turned to look as he and Cole emerged from the forest. Two weathered men, their clothes worn, their faces marked by years the world hadn't seen. One of the villagers, a young man, approached. You come from the jungle? He asked in broken English. Daniel nodded slowly. Yes, from far inside. I need help. I need to find my home. The young man looked at him curiously. Where is your home? Daniel hesitated. America. The young man's eyes widened. He exchanged looks with others, whispering in their language before calling an older man forward. The elder studied Daniel's face for a long time, then said softly, You are soldier? Daniel nodded again. A long time ago. The elder nodded back. We remember the war. Many never returned. You are lucky, old one. Daniel's voice wavered. Lucky, or cursed. The villagers offered food and water, and for the first time in decades, Daniel tasted something cooked over a stove instead of open flame. It almost made him dizzy. That night, he sat by a lantern, staring at his reflection in a metal cup. He barely recognized the man staring back, a stranger wearing the face of someone long dead. Cole sat beside him. You're really going back, aren't you? Daniel nodded. I have to. If I disappear again, the story ends here. And I can't let that happen. Cole was quiet for a moment. Then let me help you get there. Daniel looked at him, grateful. You've already done more than anyone. The rest, I have to do alone. Cole sighed, eyes reflecting the flicker of light. You always were stubborn. Daniel smiled faintly. Guess that never changed. As the night deepened, Daniel lay awake listening to the faint buzz of the jungle in the distance, its voice fading behind him. He knew that once he stepped beyond it, there would be no turning back. For 40 years, the world had moved on without him. Tomorrow, he would step into that world again. And he couldn't help but wonder, would anyone even remember the name Daniel Hayes? The first signs of a city appeared slowly, the distant hum of engines, faint lights flickering in the distance, and the sharp scent of smoke mixed with asphalt. Daniel stepped out of the village path onto a cracked road, unpaved in some places, lined with buildings taller than anything he remembered. Cole walked beside him, his steps slower, cautious. You ready for this? He asked quietly. Daniel didn't answer immediately. He stared at the city skyline, a strange mix of excitement and fear knotting his stomach. Cars sped past, lights glaring, people moving in a rhythm that felt alien. 40 years had passed. The world had changed in ways he couldn't imagine. He remembered the last day before the ambush. The letters, the laughter, the campfires. And now this, a world he had only glimpsed in fleeting photographs and distant stories. Cole led him to a small diner at the edge of town. The sign above flickered in neon, open 24 hours. Daniel hesitated at the door, listening to the chatter inside, the clatter of dishes, the hum of conversation. It was ordinary, mundane, alive. Something he hadn't felt in decades. Inside, a waitress approached, pen and pad ready. Daniel cleared his throat. I need help. I'm looking for information. About a man named Daniel Hayes. The waitress blinked, confused. Daniel Hayes? You mean the soldier? Daniel's heart skipped. Yes. Soldier. From the Vietnam War. The waitress nodded slowly. People talk about him all the time. You should probably sit. The man who went missing, officially declared dead in 1974. Daniel sank into a booth. He hadn't expected to hear his own name spoken aloud in this world, not like this. It was surreal, almost impossible. Cole sat across from him. They really thought you were gone, he said softly. Daniel ran a hand through his hair. I've been gone, in more ways than one. The waitress returned with coffee, setting it gently in front of him. There's a newspaper archive down the street, she said. You'll find your story there. All the reports, the missing soldiers, everything. Daniel nodded, feeling the weight of decades pressing down. Thank you. After leaving the diner, he walked through streets lined with cars, advertisements, and people absorbed in their own worlds. Every step felt foreign. Every sound, every face, a reminder of time past. At the archive, he flipped through yellow newspapers and microfilms. Reports of battles, lists of missing soldiers, photos of Echo Company, all confirming what he already feared. His life, his existence, had been erased from the world. Officially dead. Forgotten. He paused at a photograph from the day of the ambush. The caption read, Captain Daniel Hayes missing in action, presumed dead. He stared at the young face smiling back, the one he had once recognized as himself. A small voice in his mind whispered, 40 years, and they still remember me. Cole stood beside him quietly. You're not just a memory, Daniel. You're still here. Daniel nodded slowly. But what about Emily? What about everything I left behind? Cole placed a hand on his shoulder. Time doesn't forgive. But it doesn't erase either. You can still find pieces of your life. You just have to look. Daniel left the archive, holding the photograph close to his chest. The city seemed taller now, more oppressive. But within it, he felt a spark of purpose. Somewhere, someone must remember him, must know he survived. He wandered streets and alleys, asking questions, showing his identification, talking to anyone who might know. Slowly, fragments of his old life began to surface. An old friend of the family still alive, a letter unopened, a photograph forgotten in a drawer. Each discovery was a dagger and a relief at once. 40 years had passed, but life had not stopped. Memories had faded. Faces had changed. Homes had been sold. People had moved on. And yet, here he was. A man out of time, walking through a city that had long since forgotten him, piecing together the life that had been taken from him. That night, Daniel returned to a small motel, clutching the photograph of himself with Echo Company. He stared at it in the dim light, thinking of the jungle, of Cole, of the soldiers who had never come home. He whispered into the darkness, I'm still here. I survived. Cole sat beside him, silent, letting the words hang between them. Daniel knew the next step would be the hardest. He had to find what remained of his family, to confront the passage of 40 years, and finally, to reclaim the life that had been waiting, hidden, forgotten, and almost lost forever. The city slept, unaware that a soldier had returned from the past. A man thought dead, carrying memories of a war that never truly ended in his heart. Daniel closed his eyes, the weight of 40 years heavy, yet lighter somehow. He had survived the impossible. Now he had to survive the world he had come back to. The morning sun filtered weakly through the blinds of the small motel room. Daniel sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the photograph of himself with Echo Company. Each face in that photo carried a memory, a life interrupted, a story unfinished. He traced the image with his finger, pausing on his own young face, unrecognizable now beneath decades of absence. Cole had gone to make arrangements, leaving Daniel alone with his thoughts. 40 years of absence weighed heavily, but the urgency to reconnect with what remained of his life was stronger. He had to find his family, to see if any piece of his past had survived time and distance. The first lead came from an old address he found in a faded document: Emily, his wife, and their daughter Claire. He memorized the details, though he feared what he might find. Homes were sold, people moved, lives reshaped. How could anything he once knew still exist? Daniel took a taxi across the city, the streets bustling with unfamiliar sounds, neon lights reflecting off glass windows. Every step into the unknown was a reminder of how long he had been gone. 40 years. 40 years without sleep, without family, without a place in the world. Finally, the taxi stopped at a modest house on a quiet street. Daniel's heart pounded. The door was old but well kept, the guard intended. A woman appeared at the window, older than he remembered, hair streaked with gray. Daniel froze. He had expected nothing, feared everything, but seeing her there, the presence of someone from his past, made him realize how fragile hope could be. He knocked, hesitant. The door opened, and she stood there, a mixture of shock, recognition, and disbelief on her face. "Daniel?" she whispered. "Aye, it's me," he said, voice trembling. I'm home." Her eyes filled with tears. "I thought you were dead. We thought we'd never see you again." Daniel stepped inside, taking in the living room the small touches that spoke of a life continued without him. He noticed a framed photo of a young woman, Claire, now grown, smiling in a graduation gown. A piece of his heart ached. 40 years. She had grown up without him, and he had missed everything. Emily reached out, holding his hands. "You're here now. That's what matters." Daniel swallowed hard, fighting back the flood of emotion. "I have so much to tell, and so much I'll never get back." They sat together, and he shared what had happened after the ambush, the jungle, Cole, the years of survival. Emily listened silently, eyes never leaving his face. "I waited," she said finally. "Every day, I waited for a sign that you were alive." Daniel felt the weight of those decades pressing into his chest. "I never wanted to leave," he admitted. "But the world, the jungle, it swallowed me whole." Emily's tears fell freely. "You're here now. That's enough." Later, he met Claire. She had grown into a woman he barely recognized, her features a mixture of his own and Emily's. She studied him, hesitant, trying to place the man in front of her against the father she had never known. I don't know what to say," she said softly. Daniel knelt before her. "You don't have to say anything. I just want you to know I never stopped thinking about you. Even when I was gone, you were in my heart." Claire's eyes welled up. I thought I'd never meet you." They embraced, a moment of connection across decades, fragile yet real. Daniel felt the weight of the years lift slightly, knowing that some bonds, even when stretched thin by time, could survive. That evening, Daniel, Emily, and Claire sat together, sharing stories, laughter, and tears. He realized that while he had lost so much, he had also been given a second chance, an impossible gift of reunion, a glimpse of life restored. Cole watched from the doorway, quiet but smiling. "You did it, Daniel," he said. "You found your way back." Daniel nodded, exhausted but alive. "I came home," he whispered. "Finally. I came home." The night fell soft and still. For 40 years he had wandered, lost to the world, unseen and unheard. Now he was here, surrounded by life, love, and the fragments of a past that had waited patiently for his return. And for the first time in decades, Daniel felt whole. The morning light streamed gently through the window, painting the room with warmth. Daniel sat by the table, a cup of coffee in his hands, staring out at the street below. For the first time in 40 years, the world felt familiar, and yet entirely new. He had returned, not as a memory, not as a name on a wall, but as a living man, a presence in the life he had once known. Emily moved quietly around the kitchen, preparing breakfast, her movements steady and comforting. Daniel watched her, noticing the subtle changes time had brought, gray in her hair, faint lines on her face, yet she remained the woman he had loved. She glanced at him and smiled softly. "You've finally come back," she said. Daniel nodded. "It feels strange, like waking from a dream I didn't want to end. Everything has changed, yet some things, they're still the same." Claire entered, carrying a stack of papers and photographs. She had spent the morning gathering memories, things from the past Daniel never thought he would see again. Old letters, photographs of family gatherings, and notes he had written before the ambush. Each one told a story he had almost lost forever. He picked up a photograph of his unit, young men full of life and hope. His chest tightened. "So many didn't make it," he whispered. "I've carried their memory every day. And now I can finally honor them by living." Emily reached out, taking his hand. "You're here. That's what matters." Daniel smiled faintly, eyes glistening. "I never imagined I would see this day. That after all this time, after being lost, forgotten, erased, I would come home." He walked outside, breathing in the crisp air, feeling the city around him, alive, bustling, full of movement and life. Cars sped past, children laughed in the distance, and the hum of daily life carried on as though he had never been gone. Yet every face he passed, every sound he heard, reminded him of the years lost and the years regained. Cole followed quietly. "You're not just back," he said. "You've reclaimed your life." Daniel nodded, looking toward the horizon. "It's strange. I thought I would feel bitter, angry, but instead I feel grateful. Grateful for surviving. Grateful for this second chance." He returned home, sitting with Emily and Claire as they shared stories of the years he had missed. Laughter mingled with tears, and in those moments, Daniel realized that while 40 years had taken much from him, it had also given him perspective, resilience, and the extraordinary gift of reunion. Later that evening, he walked through the small garden behind the house, the sky painted with the orange glow of sunset. Daniel touched the soil, feeling connected to the world once more. Memories of the jungle, the war, and the lost years surged through him, but he no longer carried them as chains. Instead, they were reminders of endurance, survival, and the unbroken spirit of life. He paused, looking at the stars emerging in the twilight sky. 40 years had passed since he disappeared. 40 years in which the world moved on without him. And yet, here he stood, a living witness to time, memory, and resilience. Daniel knelt, whispering into the quiet night. "To those I lost, to those I loved, to the life I thought was gone, I am here. I have returned. And I will not forget." Emily and Claire joined him, hands intertwined, forming a circle that bridged the decades of absence. Together they watched the stars, letting the silence hold the weight of years past and the promise of days to come. In that quiet, Daniel realized something profound. War could take years, names, and moments, but it could not take the essence of who he was. And finally, he understood the true meaning of home. The journey had ended, but the life he had returned to had only just begun. The world could never forget him, because he had returned to live it fully, fiercely, and with gratitude. And as the night deepened, the stars above seemed to shine just a little brighter, honoring the soldier who had come home, 40 years later, but never too late.